Welcome to the Jack Low audio experience, and today joining me is Laurence. How are you doing, Laurence?
Very well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. So yeah, we
Good.
before this podcast actually wrote, we actually had some kind of conversation and like your vibes. So I like to jump into your world. Like, what is in your world right now, and what you about? And tell me, probably let us know what's your name and how old are you? Yeah.
Sure. So my name's Laurence. I'm from the UK, and I'm 27. And it's a good age to be. I feel like everyone's worried about being the big 30, but I'm excited. I think there's more things around the corner. So
Mm.
at the moment, as I said to you before, I'm working in property. Um, Really fascinating job, seeing how logistics and how things get delivered around the world, business deals, people, international culture, which I'm a really big fan of. But actually, one of my big things is voice acting. I'd love to get into that. And as you've seen on my Instagram, that's something I've started to do. So I'm kind of in not a transition period, but I'm kind of in a zone where I'm looking to discover new things and actually, work on myself. 2020 is going to be a real, you know, look after yourself, improve yourself year. That's what I'm going to go for.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm big onto like because perspective. I'm big on perspective. It's all about how you think. It's all about how I think as well. It's all about how we actually
Hmm.
think. So you thought of like being a voice actor. So I like to jump into the
Sure.
world of the voice actor. What makes you excited? What makes you so passionate towards this voice acting stuff? Yeah, talk to me about that. Yeah.
Well, many reasons. So I think, as far as I can remember, I've always loved doing accents and impressions. I speak fluent French, Spanish, and a bit of Romanian. Kind of dabble in lots of different things, and everything to do with voice manipulation has always fascinated me. So, for example, you played Dota 2, I saw, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love even trying to impersonate those characters' voices and what they're saying. Um,
Wow.
I love to try and look at Family Guy or South Park and just kind of see how they create a character with just a voice. And I think it's actually super hard trying to
Right.
be a voice actor because you have to deliver a personality with only your voice. And that is just mind blowing. And I find it really fascinating. Um,
Right.
Also, I love to do beatbox. I'm pretty rubbish, but I
Mm.
enjoy it. I've actually, I'm using a loop station right now with a microphone and trying to make some music, and that's
Awesome.
basically with a voice, and you loop your voice and you make a song. Again, I'm rubbish, but it's fun, and
You
that
should do
is
TikTok.
all
You should do TikTok.
I
You
should
know?
do. Oh, I tell you what, I don't have TikTok, but my sister
Oh
introduced me
gosh.
to it the other day, and she's like, "Do this dance." And I was like, "Okay, that's really hard." It was so
Right.
difficult.
Right.
But I mean, you're right. I probably should. I'm
Yeah.
just being lazy on that behalf. But
I, I feel that
it's
your
kind of
vibes and everything, you should be on TikTok, man. Yeah.
you reckon?
Yeah. I,
Oh, thanks,
I, I
man.
feel
Well,
so. I feel so. Yeah.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll just think about it and see what to
Yeah.
do because I have no
Yeah.
idea at the moment.
No
That's the problem.
pressure. No
It's
pressure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, that's where I'm at for voice acting, and I just think it's going to be something I enjoy doing every day, and that's what I want to be happy in life, and I love
yeah.
doing that. So why wouldn't I? It makes sense.
Definitely. So it almost feels like before we actually started this podcast, you actually talk about that you kind of had like this main thing that you kind of do to manage your expenses and all, and then you are kind of like going for this side hustle, and then you this thing called voice acting, and then it's like
Mm.
you talk about big boxing as well. So I like to understand from your point like how was it how did it transition to you getting to the main job, and what led you to there, and as time goes by, is it like you start to realize that you don't really like your job, and then you started to want to lean more towards your side hustle? Yeah, walk me through how was it like for you?
So I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy property. I actually quite enjoy it.
Mm.
I've been very lucky in the experiences and the chances that I've had. Um, I started off at uni doing business, international business and French, and didn't do property. But I managed to meet someone who got me an interview, and then I passed that, and then I started working in Paris for 2 years. I've come back to London, started working in London in property on like some really cool cold store warehouse development, and it just I've been so lucky in all the chances and the
Right.
jobs that I have. I mean, I'm a strong believer in we are, we make our own luck. You put yourself in that position, you're in the right place at the right time,
Right.
which is great. But I just thought, well, I've got to start something now for my passions because
Mm.
property isn't my passion. And I thought, well, what do I enjoy doing? I really try to ask myself a question: what do I like doing? What makes me happy?
Mm.
And this is one of
Right.
them. I'm really just starting to kind of put my toe in the water in the whole voice acting world. Um,
Right.
yeah, I just find it fascinating and it makes me happy. That's why I'm going for it now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I find that super awesome. So I like to jump into your world of like your Mondays to your Sundays. Like how do you actually manage all those? Like I like to understand how much time you actually dedicate for your side hustle and all that. Yeah, can you walk us through this your Monday to your Sundays? Like what you kind of do, like your morning routines. Do you have any of those? That kind of a stuff. Yeah.
No, I don't really have morning routines and stuff. I mean, I think it's probably a good idea, but
Yeah.
I'll
Cool.
be honest,
Cool.
I'm a bit lazy, so I need to be focused, and I that's why I want 2020 to be a better year because I haven't done as much as I wanted to. Then again, I'm a big believer in, moderation is key. I think people who try and do so much all the time actually creates a burnout and stress.
Right.
So I'm trying to balance my life,
Mm.
socially, work, and side hustle. But um, I would say, maybe 1, 2 times a week, I do stuff with the voice. I put some auditions online. As you've seen on my SoundCloud, I've done some voiceovers from Skyrim, the game. I mean, I think everyone
Mm.
knows Skyrim.
Yeah.
um, but again, I was fascinated when I showed people like, "Oh, what do you think?" And they were like, "Is that you?" Like, yeah, that's me. It's like, wow, you sound really different, and you actually made the voice. And it's nice to hear good feedback because when I hear it, I think that's rubbish. I'm so self-critical. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I
That's
think you've got to just go for it because other people will like it. It doesn't matter what you think, really.
all right. Cool. 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 So before
Mm.
I want to jump into the your timeline that I like to jump into and where things gets very interesting for me. You talk about there's a book that you like to share regarding mindset. So I like to jump into that. Yeah.
The book?
Yeah, the book that the
Oh,
thing
yeah,
yeah that you talk about before we actually roll into the podcast. Yeah.
sure. So, it's a book called Mindset: How You
Mm.
Can Fulfill Your Potential. It's by Dr. Carol S. Dweck. It's quite famous. Actually, mentions her in his book. And she basically coined the phrase, term, theory, whatever you call it, fixed versus growth mindset. And it's a fascinating subject because you have the comparison of people who have fixed mindset. So, fixed mindset is basically when you get to a certain level in, I don't know, whatever it is, a video game or musical talent or language skill, and you think, okay, I'm good at that. I don't
Right.
need to learn anymore. You know, I can
Right.
do it. That's fine. I don't need to learn anymore. But growth mindset is always challenging the idea that there's always more to learn.
Right.
So, I may be really good at tennis, for example, but
Right.
actually, I think I can learn a new shot. Whereas good tennis players, arrogant tennis players will be like, well, I know, I'm world champion. I don't need to improve.
Mm.
I'm not saying the world champions think like that. It's just an example of how you perceive growth in your mindset.
Right. Mm. That's super awesome.
So
Mm.
yeah, so if I could ask you a question in terms of how you I think you'd be similar to me. You know, when you're doing podcasts or when you're playing Dota, for example,
Right.
do you always think that, you're good at it, or you always got a mindset that thinks, "Oh, I could be better"?
I'll say that I will want to think that I will get better. I don't want
Mm,
to come off as like being too egoistic. I'm open to new stuff coming to me. Yeah.
awesome. I think that's great as the way to be. Um,
Mm.
I think, again, as I mentioned, if you're trying to be constantly in a growth mindset,
Right.
uh, it can be quite draining. I think everyone needs to take a look at this book in theory and say, okay, that's great, but don't
Right.
try and stress yourself out and do too much, because then you will just burn out and then you'll maybe go back a step. Do you know what I mean? If you're
Right.
constantly trying to develop and change, and you hear people like, oh, they're always doing this, they're always going out at the gym, or always working hard, or constantly, that's draining.
Right. Definitely. I almost feel like I'm always like being way too overcharging towards like my performance, that kind of a thing,
Mm.
and my performance will just like feel so stagnant. Yeah. It may just like
Well,
yeah. Hmm.
it's good that you're taking a look at yourself and thinking, "Oh, that's what's bad," and
Hmm.
you're willing to improve. But don't be too hard on yourself. These things take time. I'm going to
Yeah.
be in the same
Patience. Yeah.
position.
Hmm.
Yeah, patience is. I mean, again, we'll go back to Gary Vee. He
Yeah.
worked
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
liquor store for what 15 years of his life. Didn't go out on the weekends or whatever, and now he's finally got there. I mean,
Total
he always
respect.
says, yeah, he always says to himself, if I could tell my 25-year-old self anything, it'd be like, "Well, go out, have some fun," right?
Right.
So I think he knows. He's reflected and said, "Hey, take a break.
Right.
Don't be so hard on yourself."
A hundred
It's
percent.
it's it's
Yeah.
really key, I think.
Definitely. Definitely. So, before anything else, I like to
Mm,
jump into somewhere that is like super duper interesting for me, which is your timeline. So, as far as you can remember, way back, how were you? How did you started as a child, and how do you think you were parented, and how was your like environment like for you, which make the person that you are today? Because I believe that a person is always like a byproduct of what kind of like circumstances, the things that
mm.
actually happen to the person. Like I can feel that you are super humble and all that kind of stuff, and I can feel your energy and all. It's so it's hyping me up as well. So I like to
Awesome,
understand, yeah,
awesome.
how was like your process like way back as a child, yeah, as far as you can remember. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll run you through briefly as possible because it's quite a long-winded story. But so I was I grew up in England and until the age of 14. My parents were together until I was 11. They divorced. So continued living in England until I was 14.
Right.
And then I moved to Paris with my dad.
Right.
So I had a huge transition from, uh, living a normal life in England, like a normal kid in the UK. And then I went to Paris, and all of a sudden it was just like, wow, this is a totally different environment,
Right.
totally different,
Different culture,
culture. It
yeah.
was, oh, it's crazy.
Mm.
Trying to adapt and change and just learn the language as well was so difficult. But
Right.
I've met so many great people internationally along the way, and I believe that's made me a more grounded and open person.
Mm.
So I spent 4 years in Paris there, doing GCSEs and A levels,
Right.
as is the British system. I went to a British school, right? And then I was going to go to uni, but
Right.
then I deferred that and went to Canada for a year. So I jet setted on my own to Canada to do a gap year. I was working on the ski lifts. It was awesome in Banff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just fantastic. And again, I met so many awesome people from all around the world.
Right.
And then I went back to uni in the UK in Sheffield. That
Right.
took me to Paris as well, and then I went back to England, and then back to Paris to work for 2 years in property, as I mentioned, and then that leads me here. I'm back in the UK. So I've been all over the world. I've been a few places, traveling here and everywhere in between. But I've really had a good opportunity to learn and just see different people in their cultures, in their environments, learn languages along the way, meet so many incredible people. And it does give you a really nice perspective and it makes your opinion on people more balanced,
Right.
which is really nice
Right.
because I'm sure you know people in Singapore or wherever,
Yeah, yeah.
people in the UK are very, very judging.
Mm.
They think, oh, I know someone from this country and they're like this. That means all of the people from this country are also like this.
Mm.
How rubbish is that? That's just
Yeah.
the worst thing to to think about a nation because of one person,
Yeah, we have that in Singapore as well, I think. Yeah, I think it's a worldwide thing, it's like pretty much quite a global thing, Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I like to
it's incredible.
jump into that. It's super interesting that you actually talk about judgment. So I like to jump into this area of your life, like what make you think of like this, make you experience this type of like judgment, opinions coming from everywhere, especially in the UK that you talk about. Yeah. So talk to me about those experiences and how was like your thought process like, and what do you learn, and any hot takes that you want to share, yeah, regarding this whole thing about judgment in UK. Yeah,
Um, well, judgment. It's
it's bad. Yeah.
well, of course. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of the biggest problems, biggest phenomena in our society right now, I think.
Right.
So, if you take a look at just Instagram, for example,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
it's a great app for people who want to show themselves, show their businesses. Fine. I think the app itself, there's not a problem with it, and social media in general. But people have used it to show themselves. Like, this is me. This is where I'm, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower and New York and at the beach, right?
Right.
Look at how wonderful my life is.
Right.
And then you look at yourself and you think, "Oh, I'm not doing that. Oh god, wow, oh, I've got to post some more pictures of me doing incredible stuff." And you start judging yourself. And you look at
Right.
other people and you start judging them. And it's people are getting depressed. It's a crazy phenomenon nowadays, and I don't understand it. I can see why, because it's not people's fault that, especially younger generation, they're born into an age of social media and judging and really mental problems because of what's going on online.
Right.
It's really sad to see, but I
100%.
don't think it's social media's fault itself. It's the people who are using it. It's like data input. If you have no data, you can't get any results.
Right.
So it's it's really sad to see, but people are judging themselves, other people, and people are unhappy. They only show good things on Instagram. They don't show the bad things generally, right?
Right. It's like a delusional kind of a thing that is happening, like people are kind of like faking it, on the Instagram page. They are fronting that kind of a
Sure.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I like to share about mine, like my experience towards like judgment and this type of opinions,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It affects me, it does affects me.
Yeah.
Whenever I play Dota, if I don't mute my teammates, they will start judging that kind of a stuff. And when I go to, me posting up my Instagram post, I'm quite afraid, to be honest. I don't really handle it
Yeah.
very well, that kind of a stuff. And I kind of think that it links to my self-talk. So the things that I talk to myself in my mind, that which I find that this self-talk comes from this, how to say, the society that is being inbuilt into me, which I didn't really realize it. It's kind of like a subconscious thing, but once I take a step back, I start to reassess stuff, and I find that, hey, that voice is actually not mine. It
Mm-hmm.
came from
Mm-hmm.
my parents, it came from my friends, it came from my co-workers. the things that they say to me, it's still being said to me with the self-talk. So I'm still struggling with that a lot, this self-talk thing. So I like to jump
Yeah.
into your role towards this judgment and opinions coming into your head, that how you actually like kind of like deal with those, or your struggles towards those, what's your hot takes toward that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's hard. It's really hard, and you can't. Please don't be too hard on yourself. I think
Yeah.
everyone is too hard on themselves because they're just looking at other people, celebrities especially, and thinking, "Wow, I want to be like that. Why aren't I like that?" And it can be depressing. So, in terms of judging, I mean, how do I
Right.
deal with it? Um, Well, let's go back to Dota because I found that really interesting. So I
Awesome.
used to
Yeah,
play
sure.
Dota with a friend of mine. He
Awesome.
introduced me to it, and I was like, okay, this is a cool game. I like the concept. But what I found really hard was just the negativity on Dota. It's
Right.
really crap.
Yeah.
Like it's people are mean. People are mean on Dota. They're like, "Oh, you're rubbish. You're not playing your role correctly. You don't know the spells. You don't know where to be every single second of the game. Quit Dota. Just don't ever play again." It's like, well, that's a very nurturing and friendly environment. And you know what? I stopped playing a
Right.
few months ago because I was like, I cannot deal with this negativity in this environment where people are just. I want to play the game for fun. I'm
Right.
not I'm not professional. I don't wanna be professional. I just wanna have fun. And if I can't have fun because the teammates, like you said, are, um, they're trolling or they're just giving you some really, some crap talk and they're just
Right.
they're just being negative all the time, it's like, well, what's the point? I might as well just play a single player game and not talk to anyone.
Right.
It's
100%.
yeah.
100%. So yeah, it's interesting that you actually talk about like environment, so which is something that I've been very hot on too, that I really like to talk about.
Mhm,
Like, what is it, how do you actually manage your environment, like say your friends that you actually meet, how do you control those, like how do you manage your environment to make it as positive as possible, because we talk about Dota, that it's a toxic environment, so you kind of
mhm.
left there.
That's it,
So
toxic, yeah.
yeah, so I like to jump into your role, your environment, how do you actually handle those, like how do you pick the time that you spend with your friends, that kind of stuff, or you feel it's toxic, how you actually manage it, those. Yeah, talk to me about that.
It's a tough one. I try and surround myself with people who lift me up, who take me higher, who are positive and have a good outlook on life and are balanced. I mean, it's hard because some of your friends may not be like that, and you don't, you still care for them. You don't want to leave them behind. You don't want to ignore them, but
Right.
sometimes they're not. Maybe at this point in your life, they're not the best people for you.
Right.
So it's hard to leave those people behind. But if you've got to really care about yourself,
100%.
you have to just say, "Well, look, I can't do it because this person's bringing me down," or they're letting you bring you down. Maybe just spend less time with them, keep in contact, spend less time, or bury them as a friend. Who knows? It depends on how you want to deal with the situation. But you've really got to make sure you take care of yourself because no one else will. You know?
100%. So you actually talked about like not being too hard on yourself. I like to
Yeah.
understand from your point what made you started like thinking so much about that, because I think that this is a topic that I am not very good at. Like basically, I am a person who I think I overjudge myself so much because of the self
Hmm.
talk that I have, the negative framework that I have in my brain. So walk me through like what makes you so hot onto this topic of like not being too hard on yourself. Like talk to me about like your experiences like through that make you so hot onto that. Yeah.
Um. Well, again, it's a recent thing for me. Trying because you see it so much nowadays on the
Right.
internet. I what I don't like in life is stress. I
Mm,
don't, I'm not very good at confrontation. I think I need to be better at confrontation for sure, but I'm not very good, and I've always kind of avoided it, which is not a great thing. But
right.
in any case, I don't want to be stressed in life. I want to be happy, and I want to be at a level where I can just say, okay, I'm happy with who I am, what I can do, and I don't want to put too much pressure. In terms of, I'm trying to think of an example, but
Right.
it's there's quite a few. Um,
Yeah, you can name any of those. Yeah.
hmm,
It can be super micro event because I don't really mind it not have like a super duper interesting storyline, that kind of stuff. I like real stuff, Just give me the brutal honesty, man. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I can't think of one right now, but I mean, I'll go back to Dota because it's an easy one.
All right.
You
Sure.
know,
Sure.
judging one, judging yourself because people are being harsh on you, right?
Right.
And if you're basically letting them get to you. And
Mm,
my one of my friends always said, "Why do you let them get to you?" It's like, I don't know. I feel bad because I'm not contributing towards the team. I'm not being good enough for the team. But they're being rubbish to you. So why are you listening to them? I don't know. I think it's your responsibility to make, decide how you want to react and deal with these things. And one of the biggest things you can do is not judge yourself. It's hard to do. I think it's the only solution is experience and time.
a hundred
Yeah.
percent. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People, I think before we started this podcast,
Right.
we said everyone, no matter what it is, everyone wants everything like that. They want it in a five minute video on how to do this, how to learn to stretch in 5 minutes. It's rubbish. It takes years or months
Right.
to do that. How to become an expert in video capture or voice acting in 5 videos. You're not going to become an expert. Don't be too hard on yourself. Why you just because someone put a video on the internet of how to do it this easily? Look at me. I've managed to put a video out. But guess what? They've taken years to get there, and they're
Mm,
just condensing their knowledge into one place. And then
mm,
you feel bad because you're not that good.
right.
And that's when you're really hard on yourself and you judge yourself, and it becomes difficult. So I think we all need to just take a look at ourselves and just say it's
Definitely.
okay. Take time. It's fine.
Right. Right. So yeah, so let's move on from this topic. So you talk about you having a gap year on wherever you are. So yeah, let's resume back to where you left out on. Yeah, after taking the you taking the gap year. Yeah,
Oh, after the gap year, sure.
yeah,
So that was when I was 18.
yeah.
I think I mentioned that I came back to university, right?
Mm,
So studying international business and French, and I wanted to expand on my languages. I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. I had no idea. um, but I decided to do international business because it's international, of course, and it's business leaves you open to many things. You get a taste of marketing, you get a taste of sales and business development, and some finance, which is nice. You get a bit of example of everything.
right,
But I had no idea what I wanted to do. I mean, I think I saw that you're serving in the army right now
right,
in
correct.
Singapore.
Yeah.
So that must be pretty tough, right?
Oh, somehow I got injured and then I was placed into headquarters. So it's some kind of office work right now. So it's chill and all now. Yeah,
Oh, okay, fine.
yeah. Because I on my
But
second year already. I'm soon to finish the army already. So yeah. So
okay, nice.
it's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
And do you have plans to go to university or do some higher education?
I plan to. I actually got a placing on a university for engineering, but you know,
Nice.
I I recently, I started this self-awareness thing. I realized that, oh gosh, I actually don't really like engineering. So I'm planning to apply
Uh,
for working for internships to random companies. I'm probably working for some YouTubers or some digital marketing, that kind of area towards content creation, which I'm doing right now. This podcasting.
Mm.
Yeah, I find that super fascinating. Like even like connecting with you, I find it wow. It's amazing. If I can do this for like as my full-time job, how amazing is that? Yeah, you know. And I
Incredible.
really like you to
Yeah.
put you on for another episode. You're such a chill guy. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, man. I'd love to do one. And I think, different
Awesome.
topics and subjects we can focus on. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's super
It's
awesome. Yeah.
nice exchanging experiences and hearing other people's opinions because, you never know what other people think about the subject. I could think, right, I know about the subject. This is what I think. And suddenly someone says something. You're like, oh, didn't think about that.
Right.
And it gives you another perspective. So definitely, man. Let's
A
do it.
100%. 100%. So yeah. So let's resume back to your story. Yeah. Where did
Yes.
you left off? Yeah,
Getting
yeah, yeah.
distracted.
Yeah. We got distracted. Yeah. It's cool.
So yeah, university, and that got me to Paris again. So I've been in Paris for a total of 7 years.
Wow.
So I really enjoy Paris. And the culture, French culture is nice. It's more calm, it's relaxed. In terms of alcohol and drinking as well, oh, it's so much
Right.
better. In England, you get forced and pressured to drink, and it's quite stressful. And that's why people are hard on themselves as well, I think, because they're like, oh, you can't drink as much as this person. You're not drinking fast enough, or you're not coming out as much. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh God, I can't be bothered. You know? Like
Right.
after living in Paris, where you sit down at a cafe
Right.
and you're outside and you're watching the world go by and with a glass of wine or a half pint of beer, which is a big no-no in England, and you're thinking, this is great. I don't need to be out in some crap club at 1 in the morning thinking, what am I doing? Yeah,
Right.
that's the best thing for me. But Paris is it's a mixed bag. It's like a double-edged sword. So it's great in terms of its architecture and
Right.
the culture. The people can be quite cold, and I want to be very clear on this. It's not French people; it's more Parisian people, people from Paris, right?
All right.
They're very cold. They're very blunt, to the point, um, and I don't think they mean to be. It's just the way they are, and that's okay. But it's quite hard for if you want to be a positive person. They can be quite negative.
Right.
I don't know what country you've been to,
Yeah,
countries you've been to, but
I've been in Singapore throughout. Yeah, so yeah, I don't get to
yeah,
expose to this type of like different cultures and all that. Yeah, so yeah.
sure, it's a huge learning curve. So tell me about the people in Singapore. What's the culture like, and how the people
How
generally? Is it quite are they
how
quite closed or open?
that's a super great question, because I myself am an introverted kind of a guy, and I don't
Really?
really.
And you're doing podcasts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, man,
but
congratulations. That's brave. Honestly, if you're introverted guy and you're doing podcasts, that's great. Like, good
yeah.
on you.
Thank you so much, because yeah, I feel that when I do this type of like podcast, I get to know the other person much faster, and we get into deep conversation way quicker, because
Mm,
I find that people in Singapore is like very narrow minded, very close minded, that kind of a stuff.
okay.
They don't like to share the stuff that is like deep down inside them. They like to do, I would say, fronting. I don't want to go like way too
Yeah.
judgmental or what so not, but that's how I actually look at it. That they like to front. They don't like to share what is like deep down inside their heart. You know, it's so it's so sad to look at them like this. They have so much miserable thoughts that they hide inside themselves. And
Right.
I've been trying to learn a lot about people skills, about empathy. How Gary Vee is so hot towards like being kind, having empathy. So instead of like um talking about my day, talking about all about myself towards all these people, I start to question them. How's their day going? Why are you so sad? That kind of a stuff. And I start to realize that there's like a deep down reason on why they are feeling so sad and negative, and I find that the reasons that they actually are being so sad is like so ridiculous. It could have been
Mm.
addressed like so
Yeah,
easily to the person that they are unhappy with, and they could have been way much happier. So that's my hot take towards like people in Singapore in general. But yeah, man, I just like to become a much of like a positive kind of a guy, and kind of like spread this these vibes all around the people around me. And
for sure.
doing this podcast, I hope that someone may listen to this and make their day, even if it's like a one person making their day, letting them know about that they are not the only one who is like struggling with all the issues that both of us like are facing. This judgment, these opinions that we are facing. It's like a common thing. Yeah.
Man,
That's yeah.
absolutely. And well
Yeah.
done. Like you're being a pioneer for positivity in Singapore. It's great.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
really
I,
awesome.
I think you can
And
do that too, because
yeah.
which makes me want to jump into one thing that I like to talk about, which is like you having this like self-awareness that these people are cold, these people are kind of like negative. Like how do you like keep yourself in check? Because people will get influenced by the environment, and you staying there, you
Mm,
probably will get influenced here and there, so, what so
sure.
not. So how do you actually like keep yourself in check to make sure that you don't actually get influenced by all these other people that you think they are negative? Yeah.
Well, I've taken to speaking to family and friends a lot more, and not
Mm,
only talking to them a lot more, but calling them. In our day and age, it's so easy to text or Instagram or WhatsApp, just a little, hey, how are you doing? But it's not the same. You pick up the phone to someone, I bet you, if you pick up the phone to someone, they'll be like, oh, hey, oh, wow, good to hear from you. Because it's a shock when you call people.
right,
It's mental. Like, back in the day, well, like 10, 15 years ago, maybe, people would
right,
call all the time because they had no choice. But now, if you call someone, it's like personal. It's almost as personal as writing a letter
right.
in our day. Pick up the phone, talk to them, ask them how they're doing, catch up with them, just have a chat, and you'll
Mm,
be amazed at how surprised they are. It's
yeah.
incredible, and that's one of the things I do to keep in check.
Oh,
Other times, I just take time for myself. I
right,
like to play games to chill out. I just switch off and just zone into that for a bit or watch a movie.
right.
Um, 'Cause like for example, again, we'll go to Dota. If I'm feeling in a negative place there, I'll switch it off and
Right.
I'll play something that's like fun and easy and light and relaxing. Because what's the point being stressed out when you're trying to enjoy yourself, right?
Right. 100%. 100%. So
So those are a few things I do.
definitely. So next time probably we you can actually do the podcast yourself. I think it's pretty
Yeah.
light. Like talking about all this stuff. It's kind of like having like a people conversation, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I like
Well,
to.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I thought about podcasts. It's generally a conversation, isn't it? It's just a chat.
Definitely.
That's what I
Definitely.
understand from it. And you kind of get distracted and off topic. I quite like that because you explore new things and yeah.
100%. So like you were talking about your story. So like you living in Paris for 7 years. Yeah, keep going. Like what happened there, and how did you live there? Yeah.
Um. So after 7 years living there,
Mm,
um, 2 of those years was working in property, and so I had to work in French, and English occasionally, but mainly French, with all kind of different agents and people in my office, external parties, and go on site and see the agents and speak to them in French. And God, it was tough. It's hard because it's hard enough to do that in your own language, and if you try and do it in another language, it's really challenging. So
right.
being working in Paris was actually more challenging than being at school there.
Mm,
It's like you're in your adult phase now. There's so much to do.
right.
Like France is particularly bad at um, getting stuff done. Like they take ages. They're so bureaucratic. They need 5 copies of everything, paperwork, and, have to send a letter to close down a bank account, and I just everything takes twice as long, and it's
Right.
tough. If you're used to that, then fine. Um,
Mm.
but so, I decided that was enough. I came back to England,
Mm.
and I wanted a new challenge as well, because I'd done Paris and I wanted to spend some time working in the UK. And in the future, I'd like to go to Spain to work, to America, anywhere. I'd like to just see how that goes, because why not?
Right.
There's a whole world out there.
Mm.
You got to explore it. Um, what so after Paris, yeah, so that kind of brings me to now in the
Mm.
UK. And
Awesome.
one thing that I really like is spending time with friends and family. I don't have to travel another country to see them anymore, you know?
Mm. A hundred
That's
percent.
that's really nice.
Mm. So talk to me about like more about, right. I believe that you actually talk about like you connecting with your family members and all that. I like to jump deeper onto that. Like how do you think about like connecting energies with your close ones? Yeah.
Let's see. So I have a pretty good relationship with all my family. I mean,
Mm.
I've got because my parents got divorced and then remarried, I've got younger siblings. One's what, 10, 14, and 3.
Right.
They're pretty, oh, no, 4, sorry, but so they're pretty young. And I've actually got a, a taste of parenthood because I've had to look after them, change their nappies and everything.
Wow.
Um, and I think actually the fact that I've had younger siblings meant that I've spent more time with my parents, and I get on well with my stepmom and my stepdad, which is
Right.
great. Not many people do. I think I'm very lucky with that.
Mm.
And I try to just I guess I try to just get along with them. I
Mm.
do like them, there's no doubt, but what's the point in having confrontation? The way I look at it is that my parents weren't happy, and now they are. They've met someone that they're truly happy with now, and they've started another life with that person,
Right.
and I'm happy for them. And
Mm.
it would be wrong of me to not support them,
Mm.
you know?
Definitely. Like just
Yeah. So
feeling happy for them, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. It's another thing you don't have to worry about as well. Another thing off your
Yeah.
mind, less stress.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So um before I end off this podcast, like I like to thank you, like the you waiting for me for an extra hour, before this
Ah,
podcast and
no problem.
everything.
No problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a very chill Saturday, so it's all good.
Awesome, awesome. So there's still a lot of things that I like to find out from you. That I usually really like to dive deep into personal struggles and all that, because before that we actually touch on like so quite a few topics that I'm super interested
Mm.
on, and you actually shared with me your experiences towards that. And before everything else, before this podcast ends, I usually like to ask my guests one last hot take, one last thing
Sure.
that they are thinking about them in their mind that is super selfish. This is a super selfish moment for yourself to speak up your mind that is in your mind that you are thinking about. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily has to be shared to your audience or whatsoever. It's something that you're thinking about. It can be super micro event or super macro thing. Yeah.
Oh, good question.
Mm.
So a super selfish thing on my mind right now, as in something I want to do that maybe
Yeah.
is at the detriment to other people.
Uh, Probably something that you are thinking about. Not necessarily has to do with other people. That kind of a thing. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, just something that you're thinking about. Probably like, oh, I think that I want to do big boxing. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
well, I mean, the thing I comes to mind is that um, you know, as I said, 2020 is going to be a year for me and self improvement, and that
Mm.
means learning. I'd like to learn to sing again, another form of voice manipulation. I'd like to learn to dance. I'd like to improve my beatbox, play more sports, and I suppose that's being selfish in a way,
Mm,
because I'm going to be committing more time towards those things. And maybe I'll have a singing lesson after work, and that means I can't go out for a drink with people, spend time with friends, and I'll be, less available. So that's in itself is selfish, but I need to do that for me.
right.
So that's the only real example I can think of right now.
Awesome. I think that's super awesome. You're so big onto yourself, like you want to really improve yourself. I think that that's a way that you being selfish, you are actually becoming a better version of yourself to actually can help to serve, better, you know. You know what I
Well, the
mean?
best investment of time and money is in yourself.
Yeah, a hundred
Yeah,
percent.
whether that's education, whether that's a sport, whether that's a skill, it doesn't matter. You know,
Mm.
it's the real test is actually doing it, which is what I
Yeah.
have to test myself. That so I'm being very open and honest and saying, I'd love to do all these things, but I've got to make it happen. So
Mm.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. Definitely, 100%. So, before we end off, do you have any social medias that we can find you at? Yeah, share with us. Like, where can we find you on Instagram, Facebook, or what's so not? Yeah.
Oh, I'm not a big user of social media actually, but I
Oh.
have an Instagram. It's Lawrence J Rowe. And on there you can find some sets of, I've done voice acting and a few pictures myself. Um, and I'm gonna try and start a YouTube channel, but I haven't got that yet. So for the moment, just main source is just Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah,
for joining me here, Lawrence. Like it's,
pleasure,
I,
Jack.
I
Well,
I'm
thanks for
so,
reaching out.
yeah, I'm so grateful that you joined me to have this like deep and meaningful conversation together. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
super
Me too.
awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and I hope you guys had a great listen.
Cheers, guys. See ya.